Assalamu alaikum, kia ora e te whānau, te alofa lava and bulawanaka. Welcome to the Mums That Homeschool platform where we learn about our deen, history and life skills, inspiring mums to be their child's best teacher. Today we have Shaykh Ismail Kamdar, um, who I'm really grateful who's made time for us today on our show. Um, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh, how are you doing today?
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, I'm well. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Uh, Great. Alhamdulillah for another day to try and get things right. I came across your page because I was researching the golden age of Islam, and I came across your Islamic self help website, and I was reading an article, and I actually I hadn't heard of you before, and when I read the courses that you offer, I thought, oh, mashallah, this is a such a well organized and um, detailed way of learning about not only Islam but also parenting, and you also homeschool as well. So I wanted to talk to you about quite a few things because there's a lot of people on social media nowadays that also have their opinions, which I mean it's good to utilize the platform, but I wanted to get your opinion as well on being educated in your field in Islam about homeschooling and a number of other things. Do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your background and uh, your educational history as well before we get into it, just to give people a bit of a background of what you do?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I have been involved in Islamic work for multiple decades now. Um, in 2006, I graduated from the Alimia program, which is basically Islamic scholarship program, 7 years of intensive Islamic studies. And then after that, I did a bachelor's degree in Islamic studies as well. Um,
Mashallah.
I was homeschooled basically through high school, or rather self-schooled through high school. So I went to school till grade 8, and then I dropped out, and I completed the rest from home by myself before going to university online. And uh, I have 4 kids that I'm homeschooling. My wife and I split the teaching between us. And besides that, I'm an author. I've written over 20 books. Entrepreneur. I have my websites, islamicselfhelp.com, isaacademy.com, where I have my online courses, my ebooks. I also work with Yaqeen Institute as part of the management team and as a writer as well. I'm actually have my fifth book with Yaqeen Institute launching soon, inshallah. And I think that's about it. Yeah.
MashaAllah. Um, that's amazing. I didn't realize you were also homeschooled as well yourself. So that kind of leans into my first question. What's your view on, say, how do you say, the current madrasa system versus the public school system, being homeschooled yourself, and you've also decided to homeschool your own children? What made you decide to do that? Were there, because there's obviously pros and cons in both of them, but why did you choose that path instead?
Yeah, a good question. And multi-layered answer. Think what's the best approach to go into it. So basically, when my eldest child was born, who is currently turning 16 soon, alhamdulillah, but when he was born, I was a school teacher, and I was teaching in Islamic schools. I did not like what I saw. The environment was not Islamic. uh, People weren't really learning. There was this culture of memorization to pass tests, and that's about it. I didn't really see a culture of learning, of intellectual pursuit, of
Mhm.
creativity. None of that existed. It was just a system of creating what I would call robots, right? People who just blindly follow and uh, spit back whatever the teachers tell them. And uh, I became very disillusioned with the school system very quickly. I actually was only a school teacher for maybe 2 years maximum. And I realized that this is not the right job for me. I wouldn't be able to work within the system because uh, I have very radical ideas about education. Right till today, one of my main goals in life is to produce a new education system for the 21st century. which will be radically different from what exists already. I found the school system to be inefficient. I found it to be producing blind followers. I found it to be too heavily controlled by the government. Even when it's Islamic schools, you still have to follow the government curriculum, so it's still heavily controlled by the governments. I did not like
That's
it. I
right.
found it took too much time. Right? You start school around the age of 5 and you graduate around the age of 18. And really, there's
Mm,
like just 5 or 6 years worth of work that's covered in this huge period of time. And I didn't mention this,
um,
but like when I dropped out of high school in grade 8, I skipped grade 9 and grade 11. I just did grade 10 and grade 12 from home. And I realized that most of these grades are not important. Like, there's literally nothing the schools covered in grade 9 or grade 11 that I needed for life. Alhamdulillah, I live a very successful life without by skipping 2 years of school. It's like,
alhamdulillah.
what was the point of those 2 years of school? Like, what would I have gained if I wasted 2 years studying all that? So I don't want my kids to go into the system. I don't want them to end up like everybody else. I wanted them to have a love of learning. I wanted them to have to really develop a strong intellect, creativity, their own minds, but also to be religious, connected to God, and have good character. And it was around that time I met a couple of mentors, one man and one lady, both of whom were at that time homeschooling their kids, and they were very successful. Both of them at that now their children are all grown up. But after talking to these two different families, I became convinced that I want to homeschool as well. And they both basically served as my mentors during the early years as we adapted to homeschooling. So that was quite a long time ago. Because, like I said, my eldest is turning 16 now, and they're at the end of their homeschooling journey. But yeah, the reason really was that I used to be a school teacher, and the system made absolutely no sense to me. And I don't want to put my kids in that system.
No, definitely, because that's quite interesting that you mentioned that. Were you, because you're currently based in South Africa now, eh?
Yes, that's
Was
correct.
your whole experience in South Africa, or did you um move around to any other countries?
I did spend a little bit of time in India as a school teacher, but as far as the system itself was concerned, it was the same, right? I mean, basically,
Yes.
the whole world is following this American system that the Rockefellers and them basically forced upon the world 100 years ago. Uh, and wherever you go in the world, it's the same system. It was designed to create factory workers and employees who don't ask any questions. That's what the system was designed for.
That's right. I like how you mentioned this culture of memorization because I I'm a revert myself, and so when I'm trying to learn things, I I want to actually understand it properly. I don't want to just memorize something. So when I'm trying to teach something to my son, as time goes on, inshallah, um, I wanted him to understand. So here in New Zealand, for example, um, there's there's many masjids, lots of
Mhm.
masjids, but I noticed that there's no there's only four Islamic schools in the whole country, and even then, again, like you said, they're very controlled. There is some funding from the government, but not so much. And it's still that same thing, that culture of memorization. So that love for learning is kind of lost as the children get older. And I noticed, going into the other schools and looking, because initially I wasn't going to homeschool. I actually thought I would send my son to school, and then I noticed exactly the same thing you did. Although I'm not a teacher, but
Mhm.
just I noticed that the kids, as they got older, they started losing their relationship with Allah because they actually didn't have a love for learning, or they just memorized things. They didn't actually understand it. And I thought that it's actually quite sad. And I thought, what's a better way to not fail our children, because we are answerable for these things. Um, and I noticed in the madrasas as well, it's just there's a separation of learning about Islam and learning about other subjects. And I noticed in your one of the articles you wrote on your website that during the golden age of Islam, that uh, these weren't actually separated like the secular subjects. And Islamic studies. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that of your studies and findings in that area?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, the Muslim world today is heavily influenced by colonialism. We haven't really shed the effects of colonialism, and one of the effects of colonialism was the separation of education into religious and secular. This is something
Mhm.
that basically the British imposed upon Muslims when they conquered India, and Muslims basically inherited this system and still seem to have this mindset today. But in reality, this is not from the teachings of Islam. Like historically, before British colonialism, knowledge wasn't divided into secular and Islamic, it was divided into beneficial and not beneficial. And
Mm.
it was considered a virtue to seek any beneficial knowledge. So the madrasas of Islam, if we go back to the Abbasid or the Ottoman eras, the madrasa would be a place where where you would learn fiqh and aqidah and tafsir, but it's also a place where you would learn algebra and philosophy and poetry and science. All of this would be taught in the madrasa because it was seen as beneficial knowledge, right? Each individual would seek the knowledge that benefits them. And this may differ from person to person, right? Someone who wants to be a doctor, the knowledge that's going to benefit them is very different from someone who's going to be a tailor or a blacksmith. So, really, the emphasis in Islam has always been seek beneficial knowledge and avoid that which does not benefit you. And this is the problem I have with the system we have today, with both the madrasa system and the school system. There's a lot of emphasis on memorizing things that don't benefit you, things that you're never going to use in life, just to pass an exam and to pass a test. And as for the actual beneficial knowledge,
Um,
most of us who've been to school realized that after school we had to teach ourselves the actual knowledge that matters. We had to do online courses, read books, because the schools didn't really teach us what we actually needed to thrive in life. So it's very important as Muslims that we go back to this framework that as Muslims, we seek any knowledge that benefits. The Prophet ﷺ said that knowledge or wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he should take it. So, whatever knowledge you find beneficial, whatever is going to bring some benefit to you or the ummah or your family, go for it. This is Islamic. It is Islamic to arm yourself with as much knowledge as possible of this world and the next.
Subhanallah. Yes, that's true, isn't it? And it kind of reminds me. It's over over here. There's also a attitude towards Islamic school. Well, if they're going to an Islamic school, um, it doesn't necessarily matter because they're going to be learning about Islam anyway, and they do learn about other subjects. So, there is a little bit of an argument there. What would you say to, you know, parents that would say would look at it that way and think, well, they are going to Islamic school, they are learning about other secular subjects. Like, what would be the other benefit of homeschooling? And uh, yeah, so I'll start with that one question before I ask the second half because that's
Yeah.
probably the
So I
question.
have a system of people ask me like what's the best way to teach their children. I have like a order of priorities, and my order of priorities is like this: that number one would be homeschooling. The best way to educate your child is homeschooling. If you can't homeschool, put them in an Islamic school. If you can't put them in an Islamic school, put them in a private school plus madrasa. And last resort should be public school. Like Muslims, as far as possible, especially living in non-Muslim countries. Muslim countries are a different story, but as far as Muslims living in non-Muslim countries, as far as possible, do not put your child in a public school, right? So I would say that if you have a family, for example, where mom and dad are both working and neither of them have the skills or the time to homeschool, I would say, yeah, going to Islamic school is better than going to public school. It's definitely uh the lesser of the two, right? They will get some benefit out of it. They will be around other Muslims. They'll learn the basics of Islam. Um, they will be protected from some of the immorality that comes out of public school, but it's not going to be as effective as homeschooling for a number of reasons, right? Number one is that for the most part, I don't want to attack all Islamic schools here because there are some amazing Islamic schools out there in the world. But for the most part, what I have found in many parts of the world is when people open Islamic schools, the Islam of that school is simply an Arabic name, hijab as a uniform, and Islamic studies as a subject that's taught once or twice a week. And if you fail Islamic studies, it's fine. You still move on. So it's not a big deal, right? That's it. That's as
Right.
far as Islam goes. Beyond that, Islam is almost not important to the school system, right? Like I've both studied in and taught at many different Islamic schools. And I found that Islam is not a priority. Many of the teachers themselves don't take Islam seriously. They end up being bad role models for the students, right? That they would talk to the children about the haram things they did, and the students would want to, follow in their footsteps. Um, and then the other problems with the school system are not fixed. So Muslims didn't develop their own school system. This is the problem. Instead of developing our own school
Yeah.
system that we call the Islamic school, we simply just took the secular system and made a handful of minor adjustments and called it an Islamic school. So the problems are still there. The problem of just memorizing, the problems of dividing between secular and religious, the problem of thinking secular knowledge is more important than religious knowledge, the problem of knowledge just being information rather than transformational. This is a big problem, right? In psychology, learning is defined as a permanent change in behavior. Right? In psychology, learning is defined as a permanent change in behavior, meaning when you learn to walk, that's it. It changes you for life, right? When you learn to talk, it's
Absolutely.
something that's changed you for life. It should be the same. Learning anything about the religion or life should have a permanent impact on you. But if you just memorize some dates of history to pass a history exam, and that information has no impact on your personality or your character or your relationship with God, then you haven't learned anything, right? You just memorize to pass an exam. So all these problems with the secular school system, most of them are still there in the majority of Islamic schools. So yes, it is the less of the two. If you don't have a choice, then I would say yes, put them in a Islamic school. But homeschooling is going to give you a lot of advantages that the Islamic school doesn't. The Islamic school still has a lot of the drawbacks of the dominant school system.
SubhanAllah. Um, that's true. I like what you said about the learning is a permanent change of behavior. Because it really that actually is a huge marker between homeschooling and even Islamic school. I
Mhm.
never thought of it like that. So no, yeah, thank you for that. That's um that's a nice way to put it because that would be a good way to assess learning, wouldn't it be? So how would you
Yes.
assess your children when, for example, how the public school or Islamic school, even they have grades, grade one, two, three, blah blah, and so forth. Um, how would you assess your children in a particular subject? Would you base it on that, seeing if they've actually implemented different behaviors from these particular lessons, such as, for example, you teach about learning about the golden age of Islam. How would you kind of roughly assess that, for example?
Yes. So I'm actually not a fan of the assessment system. I don't. I believe when you introduce exams and things to the picture, then the whole motivation of learning changes, and it becomes just about passing the exam. So I'm not a fan of that system. However, just for the sake of meeting legal requirements, my kids do take the exams with a local school and get their reports through a local school, just to meet the minimum legal requirements for homeschooling in this country, right? But for me, that's always not important. Like even if they don't do well in school and they just pass, I don't really care because uh, I don't find these exams or these marks to mean anything in the long run. For me, I always tell my kids that listen, as long as you grow up to be good Muslims with good character, you'll make a difference in this world. You work hard, you get your own families, you treat your families well, you raise them properly. That's what matters, right? That's what matters.
Mhm.
Not what you got on a school report, not what grade you got for history in grade five. None of that really matters in the long run. So for me, I don't really care that much about the grades and the reports. We just do it to meet the legal requirements. What I do is I watch my kids. I watch them and I assess their character. I assess whether they're praying on time, or whether they treat each other well. Are they developing good qualities? Are they hardworking? Do they have a habit of reading? Are they thinking long term? Are they vision? Do they have a vision about the future? I watch them and I assess these things because this also helps me to identify gaps in their learning, so I know what to teach them. If I feel like the kids are getting lazy with their salah, I will teach them a book on the virtues of salah, right? If I feel like they're getting disconnected from nature, we would go out and spend a few days in the mountains, hiking and horse riding and being connected with nature. So for me, it's not so much about exams, it's more about observing them and observing what kind of people are they growing into. To me, this is far more important than any mark that they would have in their report for any subject.
Mashallah. That's a really holistic way to look at it. And this is what you were saying, going back to what you were saying before. This is the true essence of Islam. This is what education is: beneficial knowledge and skills for a lifetime, as opposed to just short term accomplishments and achievements per this particular standard. Um,
Hmm.
I wanted to get into kind of a mother's role in Islam because here, for example, I'm not sure what it's like in South Africa, but here in New Zealand, it's very separated. So that the school somewhat has kind of become a parent, even in the
Hmm.
Muslim community as well. So we've just kind of relied on, the kids are going to learn this at school, so we don't really need to do this at home, or they're going to madrasa, so there's not really a bond created with the children. So I mean, there's a couple of things in that. Number one, is it considered haram to send your child to a public school knowing what they're teaching? And secondly, what is a mother's role in Islam, uh, from a general perspective and also from a specific perspective?
This is an excellent question that gets to the heart of the issue. Modernity has completely ruined the family structure and the family system. And this is becoming a crisis in the West. Families are imploding. People have no relationship with their parents. And now people don't even want to get married or have children. And this is going to cause the collapse of society. And all of it is related, right? Whether it's the rise of certain movements in the West, or whether it's the school system or capitalism, all of it's linked. All of it has worked together to completely destroy the concept of family and what comes natural. So in Islam, we know that the mother is the heart of the household, that a child has a bond and a duty towards their mother for life, that paradise lies under the mother's feet. But why? Well, because historically, your mom is your first school, right? Historically, until 200 years ago, the default was that all kids were homeschooled, and mom would always be their first teacher. And when they were old enough, she may send them to a mentor or an apprentice or madrasa or school or whatever it was. But mom was always the primary teacher of a child. And Allah has blessed women with this nurturing, loving nature that most men lack, that allows them to thrive in this role of teaching children. That's why even today, most school teachers are women, right? Because it
Mm.
comes more naturally to a woman to teach and to nurture children than it does to men, because it's part of being a mother. So historically, the norm was that from the time a child is born, right till they are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they are with mom, they are learning from mom, and she is shaping their personality. She's connecting them with God. She is teaching them how to read, how to write, how to have good character. This is an important part of the education system in Islam. A primary part of the education system in Islam is tarbiyah, that people are raised with good character, with Islamic manners, and what they understand their duties towards others, they understand their place in society, they understand how to treat people well. This is taught from the very beginning. And it's usually mom who leads with this. She's the one who teaches the kids the manners and characters they need to have. So when they are old enough to now leave the home, they do so already having this character built into them. So they go out into the world with good manners and with good character and with a connection to God and with a sense of duty towards the community. Now, what modernity has done it has separated mother from child in a variety of different ways. Um, Capitalism has made the cost of living so high that mothers and fathers both need to work. In some cases, they need to work two jobs each, leaving them completely exhausted with no time or energy to be loving or nurturing with their children. Right? They're just exhausted all the time from overworking. And then we have other movements that have demeaned motherhood, right? Many movements in the West demean motherhood and consider the type of slavery and a type of, holding woman back. And so they painted this picture that if a woman is focused on raising her children, then she's backwards or she's trapped or she's a slave. But in reality, she is doing the most important work. She's shaping the minds of the next generation. And then the school system comes in and it becomes this babysitter. And actually, I like the way you put it, it becomes this new parent. So during the formative years of a person's life, from the age of 5 until the age of 18, they barely spend any time with mom or dad. And the majority of their hours are in school. And the school is shaping their personality, it's shaping their morals, it's shaping their outlook on life, it's shaping who they are. The school becomes the parent, and the parents become strangers. And this is very dangerous. And this is unnatural. And this is creating the situation that the world is in today, where we now have children who have no love or respect for their parents. We now have parents who don't even know their children, right? Like nowadays, we deal with so many cases where a teenager may be fornicating and taking drugs and doing all these things, and the parents are clueless because they have no relationship with the child. So they don't even know what's going on in the child's life at all, and they are getting completely ruined by the system. And going back to the other question you asked, like, would it be permissible to send your child to public school? I'm not one for just declaring things to be haram. I would just say that it should be the last resort if there's no other options. But many of my teachers did declare public school in a non Muslim country to be haram. One of them went as far as to say it's spiritual suicide. You are killing your child's iman if you send them to such an environment. So yes, many of my teachers actually held the view and still hold the view that sending a child to a public school in a non-Muslim country is haram, because you're essentially handing over their souls to the non-Muslims to be shaped in whichever way they want, which is complete opposite of what a Muslim parent is supposed to be doing.
Mm, definitely. I definitely I love how you summed it up there. I definitely agree with that because there's a lot of sisters here that are struggling to get their husbands on board with the idea of homeschooling. So
Hmm.
they're not actually, and that was another reason why I wanted to get your point of view is um you're educated in the field of Islam as well on this issue because a lot of the sisters are trying to find how do I also be obedient to my husband and be respectful, but try and get him to understand the the importance and the essence of this issue about not sending our children to public school if especially if we can choosing not to. How
Hmm.
what advice would you give in that situation um where the sisters are struggling to convince their husband to homeschool? What kind of resources or tools would you use to get them to kind of transition to understand the importance of this long term for the children of the next generation?
Okay, so I would, in this case, propose that the mother offers the father a uh she basically makes a deal with him to let me try this for 1 year, right? Just to come up with this kind of idea that, listen, I really want to homeschool the kids. I know you don't like the idea, but I have the resources, I have the mentors, I have the skills, I'm passionate about it. I feel this is best for the children's character and personality in the long run. Let us try it for 1 year. And if after 1 year, if you feel like we wasted our time or it didn't work out, then we'll have this conversation again, right? Because a lot of the fathers may not realize that what are the benefits of homeschooling. And you'll be amazed in just 1 year of homeschooling how you can completely change a child's personality. Like I've met kids who, like, when they were in school, Like this one kid I was dealing with when he was in school, he was depressed. Some of his teachers actually worried that he was suicidal, and he was getting bad grades, and he was unsociable. And then his mom pulled him out and started homeschooling him. And alhamdulillah, he's got a vision. He works hard. He's deeply intellectual. He has like one of his hobbies is history, right? And a
Mashallah.
completely different personality from what he was like in school. And if his mom didn't take him out of school and try homeschooling him for a year, we don't know what could have happened to him, because school's a very depressing environment. It kills your intellect. It kills your love of learning. A lot of fathers won't realize the benefits of homeschooling until they see it for themselves. So, firstly, I would advise mothers to get some men to speak to their husbands. Uh, you know, Maybe get them to watch some podcasts, or listen to some podcasts on this topic, or maybe share some success stories with them of other homeschool families. And if the husband is still hesitant, then make a deal. Let me try it for 1 year. And if it doesn't
Mm,
work out, we'll talk about it again. I think trying something for 1 year, it puts less pressure. Instead of saying we're taking our kid out of school for life, if you say it's just one
mm,
year, most kids are at the age where even if they drop out of school for 1 year and they go back, they still will be at a decent age to be in whatever grade they're in, right? It wouldn't make that big a difference. So that makes it easier for them to give it a shot if you tell them it's just for 1 year.
that's good. That's great advice. That's excellent advice. Um, you mentioned that you have a radical idea of the education system and what you want it to look like.
Hmm.
Um, could you give us an idea of what? Uh, Obviously, that would take a bit of time to explain. I'm just conscious of time, but what in an ideal world, what would you want the education system to look like, and uh, how would that be implemented across the board with other Muslim families? Would you want everybody to kind of be homeschooling in a perfect world, or uh, a different set of schooling, as you kind of touched on a little bit
Yeah,
before?
yeah, that's a good question. And so this is my long-term passion project that I work on the side, and I don't think I'll have any actual results for this until 10 or 15 years down the line. But basically what happened was, once I started homeschooling and mentoring other people in homeschooling, it became very clear to me very quickly that homeschooling is not for everyone. That this isn't a solution that we can mass outsource. Like, you can't get every family in the world to start homeschooling. Some
Mm,
parents are just overworked. Some don't have the skills. Some don't have the time. Uh, some have no clue what to do. Some get overwhelmed and overburdened too easily. And for many, many families, both mom and dad have no choice but to work full time because the cost of living is so high. So homeschooling isn't for everyone. It's not easy. I always tell people, as someone who works multiple jobs and runs multiple businesses, homeschooling's the hardest thing I ever did. It takes a,
mm,
a lot more emotional and intellectual effort than almost anything else I do, because you're dealing with your own kids and you're shaping their minds, and you have to teach them, and you have to prepare, and you make mistakes and you learn. So it's not for everyone. So I took some time to think, then what could be for everyone? How do we fix this? Because school is a terrible system. It's a terrible, terrible system on so
mm,
many levels. Uh, we have to fix it. Furthermore, not only is school a terrible system, but now it's outdated. We really don't need it anymore. We have the internet. Like,
mm,
you can learn anything online. One of my kids taught himself how to read by the age of 5 through the internet and through resources I had given him. Like, he taught himself how to read. You don't need school to learn how to read or to do math or anything these days. So I decided to do some thinking. I asked myself, if school didn't exist and I had to design an education system, from scratch,
mm,
like nothing existed, what would that education system look like? And I'm still working on it, but I'll share with you some of the ideas I came up with. Number one, it wouldn't be anything more than 5 or 7 years. I don't think school needs to be 13 years. It's ridiculous, really. It's ridiculous, the idea that school needs to be 13 years. In some countries, even longer than, especially if someone's going to school from the age of 5 and then they're going to university and going all the way up to PhD. By the time they finish their studies, they've already lost out on the best years of their life, right? Uh,
Mm.
so if you look at the Muslim world, how it was in the past, yeah, your mom would teach you until you like 10 or 11 or 12, and then you would go to university. And so we find like the great doctors and scholars and stuff, they were already teaching and working by the age of 17 or 18. So that was a very different system from what we have today. So the first thing I would change is school would only have to be 5 or 7 years, right? Not 13 years. That's the first major change. Because even Islamically, you are an adult at puberty, right? This is the big thing that people don't understand these days. In Islam, you are an adult at puberty. And what school has done, it has created this phase from the age of 15 to 18 where you are getting mixed messages. Where when you do anything wrong, people tell you you're an adult now, you need to grow up. Or when you try to do anything for yourself, they tell you you're still a child. You can only do that when you turn 18 or 21.
That's
So
right.
it
Yes.
creates this very strange phase where you don't know if you're an adult or a child. And people treat you differently based on what suits them. Islamically, you're an adult. So to me, school should be from the age of 7 till the age of 13. That's it. After that, they should go to university, or they should to get a mentor, or they should start working, or they can start their life at the age of 14 or 15. I don't see why school has to be all the way to age 18. It doesn't make any sense. And what we find is that it is that phase of school where everything goes off the rails, right? Where you got all of these post-puberty people sharing a school, where you've got your 15-year-old and 16-year-old boys and girls sitting in the same classroom, and
Mm.
they all got these hormones running through them, and they're being told you're still a child, but you're an adult, but all of this, and then you have all these stories of zina and teenage pregnancies. And hold on, this is because you put them in an unnatural situation. So one thing I would definitely change is the age. I would say that school would be from age 7 to age 13 or 14. And also, it will only be 5 to 7 years. The other thing that I would change is I would change what I'm trying to work on is called new systems of learning, not teaching, learning. Because I realized through homeschooling and through being an educator, that people don't really, you can't really teach people, right? You can't really teach people, but everyone can learn when they are passionate about something. So, for
Yes.
example, if I had to force adults to try and learn a new language, they won't learn it. But if an adult moves to a new country where people speak a certain language, he or she will make the effort to learn that language on their own because it's important to them now. So it's not teaching that's important, it's learning that's important, right? Let me give you an example of this.
School.
Uh, History. In school, history is considered the most boring and useless subject. Nobody wants to learn history, right? It's considered boring, considered useless, it's just memorizing facts. Well, guess what? I recorded a 30 video history of Islam series. I put it up on my website. I thought maybe 20, 30 people will download it and listen to it. To date, almost 2,000 people have paid for and downloaded and watched the entire series. So this is
MashaAllah.
2,000 people who, on their own, wanted to learn history. So they paid for the resource, they listened to it, they learned it, and if you talk to them about it, they now have a much more deeper understanding of history compared to someone who was forced that knowledge in school. So I asked myself, what's the difference here? Why is it in school it's so hard to learn history, but outside of school people are so passionate to learn history? It's because
Mhm.
nothing's been done there, right? Firstly, I used a new system of learning, a recorded online course that you study at your own pace wherever you want to. I use a whole new system of learning, but also the learning comes from the individual side. It's what they are passionate about. It's not something being forced on them. So what I would want to do in the long run is create a system of education where only the basic fundamental knowledge is like taught in an obligatory way. And by basic fundamental knowledge, I mean language, maths, and religion primarily. Right? For me, those are the three basics: language, maths, religion, and manners and character. And besides that, it would be like an education center where you have access to resources. So if you want to learn how to uh, how to build something, there's a carpenter there that you can meet up with, and you can go and learn with him, and he will teach it to you. If you want to learn certain things, there's a library there. There's computers there that you can access. If you want to do sports, the coaches there that can help you with the sports. But basically, it should come from your side, that you go to this place and you study what you want to study, and it's just a handful of things that everybody has to study, right? Which is basically what I consider the necessities to get through life. Um, so a bit of language, a bit of maths, a bit of religion, a bit of manners and character, and some life skills. And beyond that, it should be you choose what you want to learn. We give you the access to resources. So I'm not even calling it school. I'm calling it new systems of learning. That's what I'm focusing on. And again, the idea is still it's very much in the early developmental phase. It will probably take me a long, long time to actually turn this into something that I can launch as a pilot project. But what my long term vision is to find a country where the homeschooling rules are flexible enough that I can actually launch a pilot model. And once you have a pilot model running for 10, 15 years, you can show people it's successful. And then you can branch out, have a second, a third, a fourth, and maybe the idea can catch on and become a new system that people adapt globally. But again, this is a lifetime project. This is not a short term project, right? This is something you dedicate your entire life to, and you don't expect to see results, maybe even in your own lifetime. But I'm passionate about this. I really feel we need to fix this for the sake of future generations, for the sake of the ummah. We really need to
Mm.
break away from the colonial education system and create something new, something that's our own, something that's rooted in our religion and focuses on helping people reach their full potential. And I ask Allah to help me to do so.
Inshallah, inshallah. MashaAllah, this is a beautiful project because I was just thinking while you were talking that subhanAllah, it's like the current school system, whether it's in the Islamic or the public system, no matter what country you go and you're right, it seems like it's just prolonging adolescence
Hmm.
and encouraging the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be doing in Islam. Um,
Hmm.
and I wanted to ask, how will the system that you've just described, the system of learning, uh, how will this system contribute to the Ummah long term? What would you uh, envision the result to be, as opposed, because you've just explained the process now of what you would
Yeah.
envision and what you'd like to see, and that's still
Mhm.
kind of a work in progress. But in the end goal, what would you like to uh, see as a system? How will this system contribute to the long term results of the Ummah?
Yeah. So
What
for
we
me, the goal of such a system would be that we produce thinkers. We produce Muslims who can think for themselves, who are creative, who have a love of learning. And if you now have a nation of thinkers, we can now, each of them would start working on fixing different problems of the Ummah, right? But as
mm,
long as we are all just blind followers, as long as we're all just people going with the flow and trying to be like everybody else, nothing gets fixed, right? What we have across the world today, in both the Muslim world and the West, are many colonial projects that are still in place. The school system being one of them. And these projects are holding us back from our full potential. There are many young Muslims who, if they were given the right resources and the right knowledge and the right environment, they could be global leaders. They could be people who change the world. We go back to the golden age of Islam, where education wasn't forced, but it was encouraged, where instead of having forced curriculum that everybody had to memorize, there was this culture of learning and thriving and fulfilling your potential. In that environment, Muslims created the likes of doctors who changed the field of medicine, people who invented algebra, people who changed almost every field you can think of. They made important contributions to it. People who were polymaths. If you look at the people of that generation, they were polymaths. Like somebody would be an expert in Islam, but they'd also be a mathematician and a scientist and a philosopher. Why? Because instead of a forced system of memorizing, they had a culture of learning. They had a culture where knowledge was encouraged and where people could really thrive and reach their full potential. And it really makes me sad when I see that already the ummah has so much problems, and on top of all of these problems, we have young people who are just being taught to blindly follow and never to think and never to grow and never to reach their full potential. So for me, this would be a opening of the doors of change in how people think. So now we all just think, the average person, they just thinks like, yeah, you go to school, you go to university, you work a job, you retire, right? So they have this factory way of thinking. I want people to stop thinking like that. I want people to think outside of that. I want people to start thinking in terms of, I can do what I want as long as it's not haram. I can
Mm,
invent something new. I can change this. I can fix that. Just like this guy changed the school system and came up with a new education system, maybe I can do the same for the economy. Maybe I can do the same for helping parents. Maybe I can do something for helping the elders. Maybe I can create something that helps orphans. Maybe I can create something that helps the poor. Help. We need to become people who invent systems, not people who just blindly borrow and follow other people's systems. And our systems need to be rooted in our religion and our culture. And they need to be organically Islamic. So our system should be one where from a young age a child grows up with a relationship with Allah, that they have a
mm.
bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this isn't going to come from just rote memorization. It's going to come from being in a proper culture and environment where you can do these things. So really the goal for me is to produce thinkers. Whether it's with homeschooling, whether it's with all my online projects like Islamic self-help or my online courses or my books, and even with this long-term project, I want us to once again become a nation of thinkers just like we were during the golden ages of Islam.
MashaAllah. That's a that's a great way to look at things, because if we are, how you're mentioning here, it's like we are collective, and the system is, well, we're meant to be collective anyway, to have this idea of contributionism as opposed to consumerism. So definitely, I think that the education part that you're trying to fix here, inshallah, is going to contribute to long term changes. Um, you mentioned life skills. I wanted to just touch on that quickly. Um, I'm conscious of time as well, so will be
Yeah,
my last couple of
sure.
questions. Um, life skills. What would you assign as life skills that would be required for not just your own children, but generally speaking? Because I remember, I mean, I'm not an expert in the golden age of Islam. I'm still learning, and I want to
Mhm.
take your course as well on that. That was quite descriptive and detailed. There was also a lot about navigation, and uh, you know, I learned about the how a lot of the stars were actually named Arabic names as well, and they use
Mhm.
that to
Yeah.
navigate where they were going. Would you say, as one example, navigation should be a life skill that um, is relearned going forward, or what other life skills would you suggest to learn or have learned?
So the main life skills to me, the way I put it for my kids is, can you take care of yourself? Right? Uh, the the scenario, the fictional scenario I give my kids is, if the zombie apocalypse had to happen and you're left on your own, can you fend for yourself? Can you take care of yourself? That's when I know you have life skills. Um, and one of the things that's different between Islam and the modern school system is, like you said, the modern school system extends adolescence, right? While in Islam, you're supposed to be raising men and women, not raising children. So my kids, by the age of 12, 13, 14, all of them can survive on their own. Like, I can leave them home alone for 2 or 3 nights and they'll be fine. They all know how to cook. They all know how to clean. They all know how to take care of themselves. They have studied martial arts. They have weapons. They can defend themselves if necessary. They know how to look after
MashaAllah.
themselves. Like, if something had to happen, they are able to fend for themselves. I've taught them how to earn money. I've taught them how to save money, how to invest in money, how to look for a job, how to learn new skills if you ever want to pivot to a different career. For me, it's simply a matter of, can you take care of yourself? That to me is life skills. That if you have a 13-year-old who can take care of himself or herself, and you have a 25-year-old who still relies on mommy and daddy for everything, then the 13-year-old is more educated than the 25-year-old. And that is what I refer to by life skills. So teaching kids from a very young age how to cook, teaching them how to take care of a home, teaching them practical self-defense, right? Teaching them how to stay safe. Like, I live in a country that has a very high crime rate. So, especially in a country like this, they needed to learn self-defense. They needed to learn how to take care of themselves, how to stay safe. Uh, you know, and teaching them any of these type of skills. The other skills like navigation and things, that will depend where you live and whether it's necessary or not. But primarily, you look at the country that you're living in and the life that you need to do. And for me, life skills simply boil down to being able to take care of yourself. So, like if me and my wife had to get sick and neither of us can do anything, we both in bed for a few days, I know my house will still run well because all of my kids know how to do everything, right? And they will step up if they see me both sick, which did happen during COVID, actually. We both got sick and the kids just ran everything themselves until we got better. So, this to me is what is life skills. Can you take care of yourself? Can you take care of a home? Can you take care of your parents? That's life skills.
MashaAllah. You summed it up really well there. So I feel like I've learned a lot just in this short chat with you, Sheikh,
Alhamdulillah.
and I really appreciate it. And I got lots of more direction and learning to go through as well. I wanted to
Mhm.
just close up with one more thing. What would you recommend? Say anyone was looking at your website and they wanted to start with a course and they didn't know which one to begin with.
Mhm.
What would you recommend as a starting point to just get them started?
I would recommend they do my History of Islam course because that is my most popular course and it's for everybody. So literally everybody, like men, women, children, elderly, there's the people across all walks of life are studying that course and everyone finds it beneficial. So it's the most open to everyone, right? But particularly if you're feeling overwhelmed with parenting or homeschooling, I do have online courses on parenting and on marriage and on homeschooling. So if you're looking for one of these specific areas, I have detailed online courses that help guide you through the fundamentals of parenting or marriage or homeschooling. But really, if it's something for everybody that you can study and your child can study and the elders can study, my history course is my most popular resource and I'm hoping to have it published as a book next year as well. Inshallah, working on that at the moment. But that's the best starting point because I believe as a ummah we are disconnected from our history, and when you understand your history, you're able to make more sense of where we are at now and what's needed for us to move forward as a ummah. So that's why I put a lot of emphasis into teaching history and writing about history and reconnecting the ummah with its history.
That's awesome. So I'll make a note of that as well for the sisters here in our Muslim co-op that I've started as well. So we'll definitely get
Mhm.
onto that. Thank you, Sheikh, for your time today. Really appreciate it. Inshallah, looking forward to more content and things that are going to come out from your personal project as well. Inshallah, may Allah bless you on your journey. And Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.